Just a very short drive.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at the Lake George Historical Association at 290 Canada Street in Lake George. Tonight, Erin Tobin, the Executive Director at Adirondack Architectural Heritage, is going to be speaking regarding preservation efforts undertaken by AARCH. All right, Erin is the primary contact for specialized projects. She also serves on the City of Albany Historic Resources Commission, and we welcome her. Please join me in welcoming Erin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ellen. It's a pleasure to be here. And as she said, my name is Erin Tobin. I'm the Executive Director of Adirondack Architectural Heritage, which is also known as AARCH, as you can see on the screen. And thank you so much to the Lake George Historical Association for inviting me this evening. It's really a pleasure being here. This is an absolutely gorgeous space, so I'm really glad to get to see it. You know, all the times that I've walked up and down Canada Street, this is a real treasure that you have here. So thank you. So I wanted to share a little bit. Adirondack Architectural Heritage was founded in 1990 with a mission to promote better public understanding, appreciation, and stewardship of the Adirondacks' unique and diverse architectural heritage. Our full-time staff of 5 are based in our Keysville office, and with myself and Wilkes Jordan, our Camp Santanoni historic site manager, working hybrid. And this is a picture of the 5 of us, our 5 full-time staff, in front of the main door at Great Camp Sagamore, the one over in Racket Lake, not the one up the road. We have there our educational programs director, Nolan Cool, our preservation services director, Christine Bush, and Samantha Johnson, our membership and communications director. So here you see our office building on Keysville's Main Street, which was built around 1849 for the offices of the Eagle Horse-Nail Company, which became the Ausable Horse-Nail Company in 1864. So Keysville was a home for horse-nail manufacturing from the iron ores that was mined a little bit further south in Essex County. The Ausable Horse-Nail Company was there until 1923 when it became furniture manufacturing. And behind our office building is a historic stone mill, which you can see in that picture right there, built around the same time. These are both survivors, rare survivors of mid-19th century water-powered industrial buildings, and they reflect Keysville's industrial history. Both our office building, the arch bridge next to it, you see in this photo, and the stone mill behind are built of sandstone that was quarried from the banks of the Ausable River, which the Ausable River is the river you see in that photo. We acquired our office building and the stone mill in 2008 and rehabilitated it for our offices, moving in about 12 years ago. We have since sold both buildings, and the mill is being used for special events, such as an arts festival that's held every year, the 3rd weekend in January, which we just did. That's through 80K Action. So the third Saturday in July, if you go up to Keysville, there's a Keysville Community Arts Festival put on by Adirondack Action, and it's always a really fun time. They have plein air artists doing paintings in and around Keysville for the week prior, and then they have an art show that you can view the different art and purchase it. So we work to preserve, AARCH works to preserve the region's architecture and communities through partnership and collaboration in education, action, and advocacy. And these photos represent ways in which we fulfill our mission through educational tours and programs, hands-on technical workshops, work with communities and individuals seeking to preserve their buildings and invest in their downtowns. We share information about funding and provide technical assistance, and we preserve and interpret Great Camp Santanoni in Newcomb, which we've done in partnership with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the town of Newcomb since our founding. a little bit like the Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance here in this community, where there's a private friends group that really manages the site, even though it's part of, under the auspices of the Department of Environmental Conservation. And have any of you been to Camp Santanoni in Newcomb? It's worth a visit. You can take a wagon in and get a tour in the summer, and every day, 3 times a day, we have summer interns who give tours, and it's a really special place. We also publish books as part of furthering our educational mission, and these are the 3 that we currently have in stock. And our educational programs showcase the architecture and built heritage of our region, at bringing cultural programs to year-round regional residents and drawing heritage tourists to learn more about Adirondack architecture. In 2023, we offered 31-day-long tours and hands-on workshops, plus 11 webinars and in-person talks like this one. Our programs examine architecture while exploring how history and place come together. Our first tour this summer was of Adirondack Grange Halls, and here you see 2 of those Grange Halls that were featured. The white building on the bottom left is the Wadhams Grange, and then the red one on the top right is the J. Craft Center, which was known as the Whiteface Grange. And then this tour also went to the Waylandsburg Grange, which is in the town of Essex, which they have events and concerts and things, talks, and the Sable Valley Grange, which is next door to us in Keysville, which is still a functioning Grange Hall, an agricultural Grange Hall like it was built for, which is pretty neat. All with different uses, and so another way, I inadvertently had our kind of the overview of our programs focused on agriculture. We also explore agricultural heritage as reflected in the built environment through our Small Farms Rising tour series. And these are photos from our Adirondack Grains tour and our Small Farms Keysville tour that we did last year. And this year we have put together 3 of these Small Farms Rising tours in Keysville, in Saranac, and in the Champlain Valley. And I was just telling Alex that we have, yesterday we did our Saranac Small Farms tour. And on August 5th, I believe we still have space on the Grains tour, which is a half-day tour that ends with wood-fired pizza from the oven at Triple Green Jade Farm in Willsboro. And this red building here is known as the Breadery at Triple Green Jade Farm. So that's just an example of, the kinds of things we look at, but we also bring attention to the importance of Adirondack rustic architecture, which when you look at this great camp, which is William West Durant's Pine Knot, and what many refer to as the start of the Adirondack rustic style, this is what you might think we do all the time, and we certainly do this, but we also have Grange Hall tours and farm tours. And this is one of our programs that sells out when we visit Racket Lake and we go to Pine Knot. It sells out very quickly. We've also done tours of camps designed by architect William Coulter, who was the first major professionally trained architect to establish to practice in the Adirondacks. So he had his practice and office in Saranac Lake. And this was active about 20 years after William West Durant's Pine Knot. Coulter was about 15 years younger than Durant. And his camps tended to have these huge sweeping porches that extended from the main building so that you could take advantage, and the main building was always sited so you could take advantage of the mountains and the lake views that the Adirondacks are known for. But I liked this image. This is a Coulter camp on Upper Saranac Lake that we go and visit. And I think it's contrast to this camp. You can see you've got a lot of that rustic style. So this is Pine Knot on Racket Lake. This is William, and this is the Upper Saranac camp designed by William Coulter. So you see the similarities, but also kind of how the style evolved. Another place we visit is Santa's Workshop. This is in Wilmington. Have any of you been to Santa's Workshop? it's worth it. It's worth a trip. It's, you know, it's in Wilmington, so it's a ways up there, and I think its heyday, it one of its heydays has passed. We hope it hits another one, but people who have spent their lives in the Adirondacks often know Santa's Workshop, and they'll have events all year round. It's sometimes cited as being the first amusement park. This was designed and built by Arto Monaco, and Arto Monaco at a time worked for Walt Disney. And this developed, Lake Placid businessmen reached out to Arto Monaco to design and develop the storybook themed site in the late 1940s. Monaco was born in 1913. He attended the Pratt Institute in New York City. He worked for MGM and Disney, but then he created all these amusement parks here in the Adirondacks, including some near here. All right. So we also visit places beyond the Blue Line, and this year we went to Buffalo and explored the connections between the Adirondacks and Buffalo, touring some of Buffalo's iconic masterpieces. So you see our tour group here. And then our hands-on preservation trades training workshops. This past weekend, we did a window restoration workshop focused on restoring your wood windows. And this was at the Adirondack Mennonite Heritage Farm out in Croghan. Talk about, another corner of the park. Here you see the window workshop we did a year ago, which we had in Keysville, inside that Ausable Valley Grange. So those are our educational programs, and I wanted to give you an idea of the kind of the breadth and the depth of what we talk about when we do our tours. But we do a lot more than that as well, and including writing National Register nominations. And these are photos of the St. Lawrence County Government Complex in Canton and a residential neighborhood in Malone. And AARCH did the National Register nominations for those historic districts and others. So in today's Adirondack Daily Enterprise, they mentioned in Saranac Lake, there was an expansion of a historic district, and we're the ones who were contracted by Historic Saranac Lake to write that nomination. We also have webinars. So we do in the winter, these are the two webinars we had this winter in February and March, but we want to stay engaged with our community in the winter when sometimes it's harder to get out to an in-person talk. So we try to have a few webinars each year to bring people together online. And we honor excellence in historic preservation. So these are, last year, our awards program was at the Hitching Post down the road in Lake Venar, which had received a preservation award in 2022. And so these are photos of our last year's awardees. We haven't yet publicly announced this year's, so stay tuned. You can watch the news, but our awards program will be on Friday, October 4th at 4 o'clock, and we're going to be up in Crown Point at War Cannon Spirits, which is very cool. Have you been to War Cannon? So it's a distillery, and they make pizza, and it's a great place. It's in a mill building that was restored and rehabilitated for this distillery and restaurant. They've got really good food, and it's right on the edge of the hamlet of Crown Point. You can look out over, there's a stream there. So it's a very neat site. We also serve as the fiscal sponsor for grassroots preservation efforts and friends groups. Fire Tower Friends groups were among our first fiscal sponsorships. And here's photos of Hurricane and Polka Moonshine. These are the two friends groups that we're currently serve as fiscal sponsors for. And the Fire Tower coordinator for Polka Moonshine up near Keysville is one of our part-time staff people, but really operates independently. More recently, we've acted as a fiscal sponsor for two active preservation efforts. This is the Thomas Memorial AME Zion Church in Watertown. which has been vacant for since 2012. And there's a local effort to stabilize the building. The cement blocks here were built by the congregants in 1909. And the building, because it's been vacant, the cement blocks are deteriorating, and there's an effort to preserve the structure and bring it to some use for the surrounding community. And then we're also working with a group in Blue Mountain Lake who wish to preserve the steamboat Tuscarora, which is the last surviving steamboat that ran through Blue Mountain Lake, connecting from the Marion River Carry. And this is a project to relocate the steamboat off of private property. This picture there on the right is the way it looks right now, and to a site across from the lake in Blue Mountain Lake. So not right on the lake, but just across the street. To interpret its role in the history of the region as an attractive and accessible public space, an exhibit space. And if you go to the Adirondack Museum, the Adirondack Experience, there's a great little interactive display where you can see the steamboat that gets picked up at Marion River Carry and goes through the lakes to Steamboat Landing and Blue Mountain Lake and goes back. It's like it's a historic exhibit probably at this point, but it's a fun one. And then last year, AARCH added grant funding support to our toolbox of ways that we fulfill our mission. Through a grant from the National Park Service, we began the Adirondack Rural Revitalization Program, which funds capital rehabilitation projects that contribute to their community's character, that follow preservation standards and create economic development through supporting new or continuing uses of public historic buildings. So this building, for example, could have been an applicant to that program. We funded 11 projects in 8 counties, totaling just over $680,000. And this is the historic Salem Courthouse in Salem in Washington County. I chose to feature just one of our 11 recipients. And the Historic Salem Courthouse Association does so much for their community. It's a really neat nonprofit. So the building is owned by the town. They have a lease on it, and they do a lot of community events. They have performance space. They have a commercial kitchen that people can use. They have meeting space, all kinds of great uses for their building. And we were able to support fire protection and upgrading and rehabilitating the main hall inside the building. And this is the Heinzelman Library on Brant Lake, which is currently also being used as a resource center, a history resource center. And this sweet building it has modern replacement windows that need to be replaced again. So we funded the project to replace I'm not even sure they're 20 or 30 years old, with better replacement windows that are more historically appropriate. And then, of course, this is a photo of the main lodge at Great Camp Santanoni. We were founded in part to save Camp Santanoni. And this picture is shown with Newcomb Lake in the background. Great Camp Santanoni welcomed its first guests in 1893, and it's one of the earliest examples of that Adirondack Great Camp that I was talking about with Pine Knot and William Coulter. But this was built for Robert and Anna Prine from Albany as a retreat from the city, and it was designed by architect Robert Robertson. So this is a photo of Robert and Anna Prine. This house is their house in downtown Albany, opposite Washington Park, designed by Robert Robertson, and that's the Camp Santanoni book plate. This is the entire Santanoni Preserve of almost 13,000 acres that the Prines ultimately owned, and is now part of the Adirondack Forest Preserve. And this is a better view of the 32 acres that make the historic area inside the Santanoni Preserve. And this is a National Historic Landmark. It's the highest designation that you can have in the country for historic preservation, for significance. And there's 3 building complexes: the Gate Lodge, which is down by the road, the farm, which is a mile up the trail from the Gate Lodge, and then the main camp complex, which is about another 3.5 miles from the farm. So once you enter, you park down here, and then as soon as you enter the trail, you're in the forest preserve. So there's no cars, you can walk, you can bike, there's a horse-drawn wagon you can take, and that's how you access it. So it's this very special wild place deep in the forest preserve. And this is a plan of the camp at Santanoni. So these are the rooms. It's a series of pavilions that are linked by a 5,000 square foot porch, designed sort of to look like a bird in flight, because Robert Prine was really influenced by Japanese architecture. And you can see these different influences. His father was an ambassador to Japan. He traveled there. Here is a photo of them building the Great Camp. More than 1,500 spruce trees were logged, and they tried to log them from just outside the main area. So you see there's spruce trees right around the building still, because they wanted to keep that wooded area. Also at Santanoni, the spruce logs were stripped of bark and they were varnished, which gives it a more finished appearance than like at Camp Pine Knot and some of the others. So if you were to visit a lot of these great camps, you'll see that the logs still have bark on them, but not at Santanoni. And the Prines and their friends were so eager to visit that they often came out for their spring party, or they came out for their first spring party, even while there was construction happening around them. And here's a picture of the main hall when you walk in. And this is what it looked like historically. There was lounging and dancing and a dining area. Here you can see the dining area on one side and a library and den on the other. Some fun historic photos. The porch of the main camp was really the principal space where the Prines and their guests spent their time. And it's situated in such a way overlooking Newcomb Lake that you get a really good breeze coming off of it. So there's not, like, the bugs and the black flies are not much of an issue when you're on that porch. When you're at the farm or kind of behind the camp, they are. But this space was always a really pleasant place to be. I suppose unless it's very cold and there's a storm, because you get all that wind. And here's some examples of people then and now enjoying that porch. We have an art center set up. There's picnic tables where you can have lunch. But even back then, you see the historic picture of a young woman reading, kind of on the very edge of the porch. The farm is so the main camp was built, and then the farm was built after that, beginning in 1896. So the main camp, 1893, farm began 1896. Robert Prine was very into having a gentleman's farm and agriculture. And so he built this closer to what is now the center of the hamlet of Newcomb. And this is a picture of the herdsman's cottage, which is one of the buildings that was there on the site when Robert Prine bought up all this 13,000 acres, and it was added to kind of modernize it. And this is the barn that sadly burned 20 years ago last weekend. And the creamery, so you'll see this if you go there. This is the creamery, which was built in 1904. So it's one of the later buildings on the farm. And this was really built as the centerpiece of the complex, along with the barn itself. And this was designed by a different architecture firm called Delano and Aldrich from New York City. They were working at other Santanoni projects at the same time, like the Gate Lodge, which you'll see in a couple moments. At a time when tuberculosis and influenza were infecting hundreds of thousands of people, the Santanoni dairy provided safe milk and dairy products, not just to the Prines, but also their guests and also to the residents in Newcomb. And this is the smokehouse in the woods, which produced bacon. So there's a little Santanoni bacon tag. And this is a 1919 Sears Roebuck catalog building, which is the farm manager's cottage. It's the very last building built on the farm complex. And this is what it looked like back then. You can't see a picture quite now, but the woods are much closer now. And that's it on the left with the circle, but then on the right you can see that's the model house that it was built from. And now we're working, so we started 5 miles out at the main camp in Newcomb Lake, and we worked our way gradually closer to the parking lot. And now you're at the Gate Lodge and the Gatehouse, and Robert Prine wanted to keep he privatized the road, which had been public, and he wanted to keep, manage crowd control. So he built this gatehouse, and he had a winding road that went through it. You can see an artistic rendition there. Designed by Delano and Aldrich, as I said, who did the creamery and an artist studio out at the main camp. There's another nice Gate Lodge photo. So now the road goes straight up the hill. There's kind of a detour drive under that arch, but they redirected the road to just kind of go directly up to the parking lot now. In 1953, so the Prines owned the property until 1953. By that time, Robert and Anna had passed away. It had gone into a family trust. The children were now adults and, didn't really have the wherewithal to keep the place up. So they sold it to the Melvins, which the Crandall and Myron Melvin of Syracuse. They were a prominent Syracuse family and still are, banker and lawyer. And the Melvins owned Santanoni for the following 20 years and did a lot of work maintaining it. So when the Prines owned it towards that end, it was in a trust. The children had their own lives and families, and the buildings needed a lot of work. So the Melvins really invested in the property, and we have them to thank for the fact that it's still there, because 20 years later, they sold it to the Nature Conservancy for the Adirondack Park. The Adirondack Park Agency had just been created. There was a period of a lot of land acquisition by the state. So the Melvins wanted this preserve to become part of the Adirondack Forest Preserve, sold it to the Nature Conservancy, who then sold it to the state. And then there it sat for a number of years. And that's when the preservationists got involved. So the Preservation League of New York State, which was founded in 1974, they were really at the forefront of efforts to save Camp Santanoni, along with, you can see some pictures of other grassroots advocates here. And over the next almost 20 years from when the state acquired it, there was a period of a lot of advocacy on all levels. But the core was the Preservation League and the town of Newcomb, whose town supervisor, the late George Cannon, really believed in the site as a place of heritage tourism and that it could bring economic development to the community. AARCH was founded in 1990, in large part to save Camp Santanoni. And at that point, once we're founded, shortly thereafter, there was an announcement that it would be preserved. It had a demolition order out on it. And other Adirondack camps had been demolished. Lake Lila out in Franklin County, Nahasni was taken down. So we were very grateful that Camp Santanoni was saved, and then we got to work restoring the buildings. So we also created, with financial support from the town of Newcomb, a summer internship program. So for the last 34 years, we've had interns, graduate students, professionals, upper college students living on the site and giving daily tours and doing hands-on maintenance work, learning trade skills out at the main camp. So here you see a picture of some interns giving tours. This is a photo of the National Historic Landmark dedication. When it became a National Historic Landmark, as I mentioned earlier, the highest honor for a historic site. And there's another picture of that National Historic Landmark dedication with a plaque. Sadly, the barn has burned, so if you go out there now, you won't see this beautiful barn on the right as you're heading in, but you will see the stanchions that were used for the dairy cows. You'll see the foundations of the barn. We've continued to make stabilization improvements. So 3 years ago, we completed a roof replacement project and the main camp and the gate lodge. These are our interns. Oh wait, and this photo down here is the group that was collected last month to focus on fire protection. So our current big project at Camp Santanoni is fire protection. You saw that the barn burned down. The main camp is 5 miles in from the parking lot. It's an administrative access road, so you could get an emergency vehicle in there this time of year, but during mud season and in the winter, it's not a plowed road, and Newcomb gets many, many feet of snow. So were something to happen, there would be no way to really get emergency services there. So that's our current project. And these are some of our interns from a couple years ago, setting up shop at the main camp, working on windows. We host every Saturday, we'd have a farm tour. And we do gate lodge tours. So this Saturday, there'll be a farm tour. There'll be tours at the main camp. There'll be a farm tour, and there'll be a gate lodge tour. Another one of our upcoming projects is to bring some life back to this house. This is called the West Cottage. It's a building that was there before the Prines bought the property. It was a farmhouse, moved to this site, and it used to have a porch, which came off sometime in the last 30 years or so. And we'd like this to be something, maybe a visitor center, maybe it could be a site for indoor restroom facilities. Right now, there's just some privies. But this is one of the places that we explore on our gate lodge tours. There's a picture of us working on that sweet little house. And that is it. So this is a picture of all of our group at the Graves Mansion in Osable Forks, which is the home of our plaster workshop. So for 3 years in a row, we've had a 2-day historic plaster repair workshop where you learn how to apply plaster. And this is the group from last year outside the Graves Mansion. And I put that at the end to invite everybody to come and join us. Thank you. Yes. We don't know. Presumably some man-made cause. We don't think it was natural. There is no electrical. Yeah. Possibly, it's hard to say. I think, I don't think it was lightning. I think it was either an accidental, hopefully not on purpose. It's a place where a lot of kids like to hang out. It's also a place that a lot of people didn't think should be in the Adirondack Park. So we don't know, but it was very, very sad. Oh, a great many that are, a lot of them are privately owned. And when we say kind of Great Camp, we refer to like a large Adirondack rustic style camp with often, and they're characterized by having functions in different spaces, usually in different buildings, where you have a kitchen in one building, often but not necessarily, or a series of guest houses. You can have a main house with the living area and then bedrooms. So there's different configurations of them, but the complex, it's usually characterized by that complex of different buildings and that rustic style where you're using, logs and branches and wood. Yes. Not really. No, definitely not after one of the last, not quite great camps, but William Diston, who was an architect who studied under William Coulter. He built DeBar Pond Lodge, which has been in the news somewhat recently, up in Franklin County, and that is sort of this like Great Camp, large Adirondack camp style with log construction and different buildings, but it's kind of presaging this shift away from that real rustic architecture. So that building has half logs. You know, it's sided. It's not a log structure. It has all of the functions really within. It's got a guest house, but really most of the functions are within that one building. And so you start to see a shift away from that. But so the main William West Durant in about mid 1870s through up in, I'd say the 30s is when you really see that style and the integration into nature. And you think, these were the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and people who were building out on Newport or the North Shore of Long Island, these grand kind of palace estates. And then here in the Adirondacks, there are these low, close to nature, using natural materials from the region. You're not building a marble house. You're building a log cabin, basically, but a really ornate one. Yeah. Any other questions?
So AARCH does grants for projects?
We had a single grant round. We got an allocation of funds from the National Park Service to give capital restoration grants to projects, and we have spent that money. We would like to continue the program, but we need more money in order to redistribute it. So this program went through, it was federally funded. So once we get through, we have these 11 grants that we funded, and we have to get through those and show that they were all successful. And then we hope to reapply or find other funds that we can, distribute, even if these are grants of up to $100,000 we gave. But even if we could give some small grants, it would be nice to help support preservation efforts.
Well, does the state of New York support you in any way as far as whether it's financially?
We get operating support currently from the New York State Council on the Arts. They have a design arts program that funds historic preservation organizations, as architecture is a design art. We also get support from the Department of Environmental Conservation for capital projects and for some of our management and interpretation at Camp Santanoni. So those two are our main sources. Yeah. A little bit, yeah. Most of our support comes from members. So we're a membership nonprofit, and I have membership materials there. You can join on our website, which is AARCH.org, which I'll say for the online audience. And you can join us, and that's how we get the majority of our operating budget is through memberships, member fundraisers, and our educational programs. We have I think we're about 800 or 900 member households. I think the last number I heard was 900. So that puts us about 1,500 individual members, because of course some of those are 2 people. Yes. Yes, and members get priority. They get kind of early access to our tours through our lottery. So that's a really great member benefit, as well as discounts on all of our programs. So a lot of our tour programs sell out very quickly. And if you're a member, you get kind of early choice on that, which is a nice benefit. So, yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Thank
Terrific.
you so much, Erin.
Well, thank
you
you
very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please visit next week. We have Margie Mannix coming. She's our town historian, town and village historian. And also, she is a Lake George kid. She'll be speaking on the west side of Lake George next Tuesday at 6, August 6th. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.